The ending of Frankelda transforms what initially appears to be a fantasy adventure into something much more personal. Beneath the monsters, magical kingdoms, and dream worlds, the film is about creativity, grief, self-worth, and the struggle every artist faces when someone tries to take ownership of their voice. By the time the credits roll, Frankelda defeats Procostes, Topus Torrentus survives its civil war, and Hernal seemingly dies, yet the movie's final scenes reveal that the real story is not about victory over a villain, it's about understanding why stories matter in the first place. Procostes begins as the royal nightmare writer, a figure responsible for creating the stories that sustain the creatures of Topus Torrentus. At first, he appears strict and arrogant, but his true motivation is revealed much later. Unlike Frankelda, Procostes has stopped creating. His nightmares have become repetitive, predictable, and disconnected from modern fears. While the kingdom evolves, he remains trapped in the past. When he discovers Frankelda's imagination, he immediately recognizes something he no longer possesses: originality. That's why he steals her stories. The theft is about more than ambition. Procostes is terrified of becoming irrelevant. He sees Frankelda as proof that his era is ending. Instead of adapting, he chooses to exploit her talent and claim it as his own. His greatest fear is not death, it's being forgotten. Ironically, that fear becomes the exact weapon Frankelda uses against him. For most of the movie, Frankelda allows others to define her. Her grandmother tells her writing is pointless. Publishers dismiss her stories without reading them. Procostes tells her she lacks talent. Even Hernal, despite caring about her, makes decisions for her without fully respecting her agency. Because of this, Frankelda spends much of the story doubting herself. The climax changes everything. When Procostes traps her inside another nightmare, he expects her to remain a victim. Instead, she realizes something important: she is the author. As the creator of stories, she has power over the narrative itself. Rather than escaping the nightmare, she rewrites it. This is the moment when Frankelda fully becomes the person she's been trying to be since childhood. She stops seeking validation from publishers, authority figures, or critics, and finally trusts her own voice. That is why Procostes loses. He believes stories are tools for controlling others. Frankelda understands that stories are acts of creation. The nightmare battle works on two levels. On the surface, Frankelda defeats a villain who tried to steal her work. Symbolically, she defeats every voice that ever told her she wasn't good enough. Throughout her life, people constantly tried to limit her imagination. Procostes becomes the embodiment of those doubts. He represents criticism, rejection, fear, and creative insecurity. When Frankelda rewrites his fate, she's doing more than defeating an enemy. She's reclaiming ownership of her imagination. The fact that Procostes' worst nightmare is becoming obsolete is particularly important. His downfall isn't physical destruction, it's irrelevance. A storyteller who refuses to grow eventually becomes a relic. The movie suggests that creativity survives only when artists continue evolving rather than clinging to old formulas. Hernal's death is the most heartbreaking part of the film. For much of the story, he serves as Frankelda's guide into a world where her creativity is valued, and like everyone else in her life, he genuinely loves her stories. More importantly, he believes in her before she believes in herself. His death, therefore, feels cruel and unfair. However, the film deliberately avoids turning his sacrifice into a traditional fantasy ending where everyone survives. Instead, Hernal's death reinforces one of the movie's central ideas. Stories and reality are inseparable. Loss exists, pain exists, people die. But stories allow their influence to continue. Hernal changes Frankelda's life forever. Because of him, she gains the confidence to embrace her identity as a writer. Even after he's gone, his impact remains. In that sense, Hernal never truly disappears. Is Hernal really alive at the end? The answer is both yes and no. Physically, Hernal dies from the wounds he suffered before entering the nightmare. The movie makes that point very clear. However, the final encounter between Frankelda and Hernal takes place in a space that exists between reality and fiction. There he explains that stories preserve existence in a unique way. As long as their story continues to be told, part of him survives. The film intentionally leaves this ambiguous. Perhaps Frankelda is meeting his spirit. Perhaps she is speaking to a version of him that lives within imagination. Or perhaps the scene is illustrating a metaphor rather than a literal event. What matters is not whether Hernal physically returns. What matters is that Frankelda realizes stories allow people to endure beyond death. Hernal becomes immortal through memory, imagination, and storytelling. By the end, the kingdom narrowly avoids destruction. Procrustes' rebellion fails, the portal between worlds is closed, the royal family survives. Vitellitas seeks redemption after being manipulated into supporting the coup. Most importantly, the kingdom discovers a new path forward. For generations, the Sustos depended on outdated fears to survive. Procrustes wanted to solve the problem through domination and invasion. Hernal believed the answer was creativity. The ending proves Hernal was right. Topus Torrentus survives not because it conquers humanity, but because it learns to evolve alongside human imagination. The kingdom's future will depend on new stories rather than old nightmares. The entire film revolves around one question: are stories real? At the beginning, young Francisca wonders whether the creatures she imagines can see her. By the end, she finally understands the answer. Stories may be fictional, but their effects are real. They shape identities, they preserve memories, they inspire courage, and they help people survive grief. Frankelda starts the film using fantasy to escape the pain of losing her mother. Over time, she learns that imagination is not an escape from reality. It is a way of understanding reality. That realization becomes the film's most important message. Reality gives birth to stories. Stories help people make sense of reality. Neither can exist without the other. The ending of I'm Frankelda is ultimately a celebration of artists and storytellers. Frankelda spends years being told that her imagination is strange, useless, and inappropriate, yet the very thing others criticize becomes the force that saves an entire world. Her journey is not about becoming famous or proving critics wrong. It's about believing in herself. When she chooses to keep writing after losing Hernal, she makes the most important decision of the movie. She refuses to let grief, rejection, or fear define her future. Instead, she keeps creating. The final scenes suggest that stories never truly belong to kings, publishers, critics, or gatekeepers. They belong to the people brave enough to tell them. And as long as Frankelda continues writing, neither Hernal nor the worlds they shared will ever truly disappear.